Okay, and we'll go ahead and get started. So this session is on, it's basically going to be for how, some strategies, just ways to take advantage of the webinar technology that many of you are using now to teach classes. So, we'll just go ahead and get started. First of all, why are you doing this? Well, obviously you want to replicate the classroom experience for your students. So you have obviously most programs are closed down right now, so due to the COVID-19 virus. So, you want to replicate the classroom experience for your students. You don't just want them doing work on Khan Academy or USA Learns or, whatever other resources. You want them to have that, classroom type experience. I've also heard comments, and I think this came up earlier this week when somebody mentioned that they have students who are ESL students who are home, and they are, even if they were doing face-to-face classes, now the students wouldn't be able to participate. And so even moving forward, this can be an opportunity for you to develop some skills that you can still work with students even when they're not able to attend your class for other reasons, whether they're traveling, working, different types of things. Um, Obviously, you want to keep your learners engaged in those sorts of situations. Again, you can have them do what we call asynchronous work, which is where they're working with something that they can work on whenever they choose to, and you don't have to be present for that work. No other students have to be present. They can work very independently. But it's still, there's a lot of thought that the live communication with teachers and also with other students is really helpful for our students to keep them engaged, keep them feeling like they're part of something. A lot of our classrooms end up being kind of social sorts of things. So, it's a good way to keep our learners engaged in that way. Also, one of the things that we see with our pure distance learners is sometimes they really struggle when they don't have that routine or schedule. So doing these webinar classes gives you a chance to give your students that schedule so that they don't have to choose when they're going to do their schoolwork or when they're going to get their education, but they have that schedule, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 is when I'm going to do that. I've noticed that, kind of maybe a mildly funny story. I did webinars the first 2 Mondays of, this shutdown that we're having. And I didn't schedule anything for the third Monday. And I had a couple of people ask me, well, what are you doing this coming Monday? We didn't get anything. And I didn't have any schedule. I wasn't planning to do anything. And so I let people know, and I actually even logged in then to this room on that particular Monday, and there were a couple of people that logged in to see what I was doing. So that routine and schedule is something that is really helpful for learning. And then another benefit that I know some of you are seeing is you're able to record the webinars, so you can sort of like archive your instruction. If you have students that miss class, it's a way that you can send that to them. We have students with our distance learning project who have to miss the live classes we do. We record them, we send it to them. Sometimes we give them like an assignment to verify that they actually watched it. It's also something that you can use with future students. If you have students on a waiting list, if you have students who, moving forward, you can have almost your own little mini Khan Academy type of a system with some of the webinars that you've recorded. I also have this note here about quick hits. Sometimes when I've worked with students and they struggle with a problem, I might just do a real quick webinar recording of one problem and send it to that student, just showing them how, step by step, how they can solve it. There was an issue several months back where Khan Academy changed how they ran their reporting. So I was able to just do a really quick webinar, just like a little 5-minute thing of here's how you get your time reports on Khan Academy now, and then send that out to everybody. So those are some things that as you get more comfortable doing webinars, that you can see, not just for teaching live classes like you're thrust into doing now, but hopefully some things that you'll be able to benefit from moving forward. I also wanted to mention, Some of the common webinar platforms, and there's no approved list for webinars or anything like that, so you don't have to use one of these things. But if you don't currently know what to use to do a webinar, these are just some of the more common ones that I hear people use. Zoom I put first, that's what I use, so that's what you're on now. And by the way, Zoom does have a free capability. It's limited, you're limited in how many people you can serve, how long, things like that. So, you just kind of want to keep that in mind. GoToMeeting is another one. The professional development system typically uses that. Things from the professional learning opportunities, things from, some of the other professional development projects use that. Google Hangouts and Meet. Google Hangouts is the one, if you're using a Google product, you're probably using that now with your students. Google Meet is more of a webinar. It has maybe a few more functions than Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts is going to be discontinued somewhere in the near future. And then everybody's going to be directed to use Google Meet, but that's another webinar platform. The Department of Education, a lot of the webinars they do, for those of you that are administrators, whenever you participate in Amanda Harrison's webinars, they're usually through Skype. And even if you use Skype as more of like the regular Skype, not the Skype meeting type thing, that's something that you can, do some webinar type things with as well. And I've been reading more about this EasyTalks. I've been reading some pretty good reviews of it. I've never used it. I've never talked to anybody who's used it. But similar to Zoom, they do have a free platform that you can use. So if you're looking for something, the ratings for it seem pretty good. So like I said, I haven't used it, so I can't vouch for it. But other people have. So just something else to keep in mind. Somebody asked about, okay, so just a couple questions have already come in. So how could we count hours for a recorded webinar? If you're talking about for reporting, that's sort of a policy question. So what I can tell you, Kim, is how you can, like in Zoom, you can actually run a report, and I can show you that real quickly. I'm not going to get into what you can and can't count or things like that. That's something that you'd probably need to talk to the MIS folks about or your advisor. So I'll show you that in just a second. Somebody also asked a good question. Do all these platforms allow you to edit a webinar you record? When I edit, and I rarely do just for time constraints and because this is things that we're trying to get out as quickly as we can, I actually use other programs to edit webinars. I actually have a license for something called Camtasia. So basically I turn the webinar into a video, and then I can edit the video using Camtasia. And there are many products that allow you to edit videos. So that's how I approach it. I don't know that within the platform itself you can do that. I think when you record it, what it does is it creates a video, like an MP4, and then you have to find something that allows you to edit the MP4. But that's a good question, because there certainly are times where it's nice to be able to edit something out. Now, just real quick, since somebody had asked about this, so I'm going to go on I'm going to go into my account here for Zoom. And with Zoom, and the different webinars are going to, different platforms are probably going to work differently. But I can just look at this reports, and I can run a usage report by the meetings that I do. And I can just get who was on, how long they were on, things like that. Now, it's going to vary depending on what plan you're using, what platform you're using, and things like that. I would advise my teachers to use the participant list and to kind of regularly check to see who's on, and to be doing activities to make sure that your students are engaged and that they're participating, and to kind of document it that way. That's just so that you have a backup in case you're using something you can't get this sort of a report for. Okay, so some good questions there. Okay, so I want to get into webinar features, and this is probably what most of you came for, is more what are the things that you can do with a webinar to help your students. And so we're just going to kind of talk through the different features. The first one is chat. And basically chat, I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. It allows participants and the host to type comments. Why does this happen? Well, some people don't like to speak during webinars, especially when they're recording it like this. It's also helpful when there are audio issues. Some of your students probably don't have like a headset or a good microphone they can use. So a lot of times it's good if the students can stay muted so that there's not too much background noise or things like that, echoing, those sorts of things. So people can kind of type into the chat and ask questions that way and participate that way. And also it gives people the ability to ask a question or make a comment without interrupting. I've been doing, many of you know, I've been doing these webinars now for several weeks, and the one I think we had pushing 300 people on. So the chat kind of took on a life of its own, and I was talking, and then there was like a lot of like side conversations through chat that were productive. So it's kind of a nice feature to be able to do that. Some ways that you can use chat, so a lot of times it happens, just people start posting chats. But some things you can think about doing as part of your class is, a lot of times you might be on a webinar and people will use chat to do sort of like an introduction. Instead of taking the time for everybody to speak, you just simply say, okay, could everybody type in the chat? Just say, just give me your name and, what you've been doing or what you think about today's subject, or how this virus is impacting you, or things like that. And it's just a way that you can sort of do it without taking up too much of your time while you have everybody together. Another way that you can use chat is for private messages. Sometimes a student's not going to want to say that they are, that they're struggling. They can, I don't know if everybody knows this, but when you do use the chat, you can send a message privately to one student, and they can send a message privately to you, or they can send the message to everybody. Some of the webinar platforms allow participants to send private messages to each other. Keep in mind, most of those, it also goes to the moderator or to the host. But being able to send private messages, or if somebody's struggling with something and you just want to send them a quick message like, hey, are you sure you're getting this? That way you don't have to send something to everybody. Something else that you can do with the chat, and I'm going to do this now, is it allows you to, and this is another one of those things that's going to depend on the platform you use and what you use, but you can also share documents. So right now I'm going to share the PowerPoint for this. So if anybody's interested. So you should now see, oh, I'm sorry, I sent that privately because somebody asked me a question. So now I'm going to send it to everybody. Okay, so if you're teaching a class, and again, depending on the platform you're using and the capabilities of it, I think that right now everybody should see a link to the PowerPoint or the ability to download the PowerPoint from the chat. So, something if you're teaching and you want to share a document with your students, some of the platforms will allow you to do that. Okay, so let me finish these and then I'll look at some of the questions that people have. It's also, sometimes our ESL teachers use it as a way for students to do spelling, to practice like writing short phrases, sentences, things like that. So it's a way that while you're doing a class, you can have students type in responses and you can kind of check on that sort of a thing. And a lot of times too, it's a good way to just sort of get a lay of the land. So in other words, if you kind of want to, students, you can ask students, am I going too fast? And instead of them having to say, if they type it in the chat, it's just a way that you can kind of look real quickly and just see from your students, or kind of see how they're doing, or anybody need a break or things like that. It's just sometimes you can use the chat for that. So does anybody have anything else that you've used chat for, or anybody any questions or comments about the chat feature? Somebody asked me how I got the PowerPoint into the chat. And I think it's something, I don't think that it's something that the participants can do. I think it's something that only the host or the presenter can do. But with my version of Zoom, and like I said, I can't say for sure that it's with the free version of Zoom, and I've seen it with other PowerPoint things. Actually, where my message thing is, there's a little button that says File. And if I double click on that, that opens it up, and then I can just upload something from my computer into the chat. If I wanted to share a website, I could also copy and paste a link in there. And I know Bethany Lazanik and Chrissy Klinger, who've been on some webinars, have done that, where they actually put it in as a hyperlink and somebody can click on it and open up a website. So if there's a website that you want to share, that's also something that you can do. All right, so like I said, certainly feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions, or you can certainly keep using the chat. But looks like we're ready to move on. So the next thing, and this is one of the more popular ones and ones like that I'm doing now, is screen sharing. Almost every webinar that you use, whether free, paid, should allow you to share your screen. And it's something that I think is really vital for doing a class. You can share your screen, or a lot of times you can share a particular document. Now, I almost always share my screen, but one of the things that can happen sometimes if you share your screen is you might share something that you don't want people to see. There might be an email on there, there might be that has confidential information, you might have a spreadsheet with, so one of the things that you can often do is, like if I chose to, I could just share this PowerPoint. And the thing is then that would kind of be locked into what I'm sharing. So if I went away from the PowerPoint and wanted to look at an email, or wanted to look at a spreadsheet, or wanted to look and find something, everyone would still see the PowerPoint. They wouldn't see they wouldn't see what I was looking at. So that's kind of the benefit to sharing a document as opposed to sharing your screen. If I were sharing the PowerPoint, I could certainly stop sharing and then share my screen if I wanted to, to show a website or something like that, like I'll probably do in a little bit. So, it's more of a personal preference kind of a thing. Like I said, I usually share my screen just because I'm usually bouncing around to different things. And I'm guessing while you're doing a class, you're probably going to want to be showing documents. You might want to show a PowerPoint just to kind of anchor your lesson, but you'll probably want to be showing them reading samples, math problems, activities, all sorts of things like that. So, but like I said, that's a personal choice. Participants can share their screen as well. It's usually something that you have to set up or enable them to do. So, but that's something that I do a lot with students. Like if they're working on something, or if they're having technical issues, I want to see their computer screen. If they're having a tech issue and I can see their computer screen, then sometimes it's easier for me to talk them through what they need to do. If they're working on a particular lesson, I might want to see actually what it looks like on their screen. So a lot of times I'll meet with students and have them share their screen for that sort of a thing. Other ways you can use screen sharing, obviously like I'm doing now, and sometimes to keep things organized, even if you don't normally do it, it's a lot of times good to have a PowerPoint that you use to kind of run through your class, just to kind of keep things moving. Another thing that you can do is you can share texts for your class to read if you're doing a language arts class, if you're doing an ESL class. So our ESL teacher, one of our ESL teachers, Christine Ulrey, she has a subscription to this site called ESL Library, I believe it is. and they have like lessons and they have like documents. Now I went on and I don't have the paid, she has the license, I don't. So you see the sample here. This is like a free sample lesson on here. But I can share something on my screen, and then if I want students to do kind of like read alouds, then everybody's kind of seeing the same thing on the screen, and I can have different students take turns reading and do activities like that. So that's something that you can certainly do. I also, as many of you probably know, I mostly teach math. I like to show math problems. And, a lot of times I'll send the problems out to my students in advance, but then I like to have the problem on here so that everybody can be looking at it, because also, to be perfectly honest, many times my students don't look at the problem before a class. So, I can show it, give people a chance to kind of look at it. And then we start talking through how we would solve it, and just like I would do with a regular class. So it's nice to be able to share your screen like this. Again, I can also have students, if they're working on a problem, they can show me their screen as well. If they've done work, I can have the student take a picture of it, send it to me, and then I can display it and we can kind of look at their work together as well. A couple other things. It's also, like I said, it's a way that you can share student work. So I could share something my students send to me. They can just share it themselves, if I allow them to share their screen. And I use this a lot and our distance teachers use this a lot too for individual student support, as ways to work with the student individually, like where they can kind of share what they're doing. Okay, so I see a couple comments here, so I'm just going to kind of go through those. Okay, I watched a class today and the instructor was able to share her screen, screenshots, PowerPoint, websites, etc. But we could not hear the audio of, okay, good. So yeah, and Don, no, don't worry, that's not getting too deep into the weeds. Some of the webinar platforms have a function that will allow you to play the audio from a video that you're showing. So in other words, what the question is, basically they had a teacher that wanted to show a video from their computer, like to play like a Khan Academy video or something like that, but the audio doesn't come out over the webinar. A lot of the webinar platforms have, it's a setting on there that allows the computer audio to play. They'll generally default to not do that for the simple reason that if you have other sound coming on your computer, like notifications, things like that, it's going to be distracting for everybody. So it is something that you can usually find a setting for. If anybody wants help finding a setting for their specific, webinar platform, I'll be happy to help you like kind of search for it. But I'm not going to do that now, but that's something, if you come into the office hours sometime or just send me an email, it's something that I can help you decipher if it's available. Okay, another question. If you're working from a smartphone or tablet and sharing your screen, will things you write with a stylus show up? And actually the next question, I tried to have my class use the annotate capability on Zoom, but they couldn't access it. Only I was able to use it. Is there a way? Good. So the annotate something we're going to get into next. So those are good segues into what we're gonna look at next here. So so good. Some people are have some good ideas there. But yeah, like I said, screen sharing is it's something that's, I think, is kind of essential. Okay, just I'm going to look at two more comments and then we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, yeah, and somebody mentioned the platform they were using. And yeah, you might find something on the site. You might be able to do a Google search to find it. Oh, so Chrissy mentioned they still may not be able to hear even if you change the setting. Yeah, one of our teachers does do that. They use a computer speaker and the sound instead of the headset, and then they make sure that the settings in the platform allow it. I know with Zoom there is something where the computer audio will be broadcast, but I'm not sure if it's on the free version or if it's just on the paid version that I use. So there's just a lot of different contexts, but there is a way that I can set it so that if I play a video, the sound would go out in addition to like my narration with it. So yeah, so it is something to check, but yeah, that is a good workaround. Thanks, Chrissy. Okay, so a couple people mentioned about whiteboards, drawing tools, annotation. So this is something that basically allows you to write on the screen. So, and you know, I've done this a few times. I do this a lot when I'm teaching. So Zoom actually has a drop down where you can type text in on the screen, where you can draw, where you can put like a stamp on things, you can put a spotlight on things. So Zoom actually has like a very robust amount of things you can do. So, but basically the drawing would allow me to just simply, like I could circle a word, you know, I could write a math problem on there. If I wanted to do the spotlight, I can use that, and you know, that's just a little nicer than using your mouse pointer to kind of show, you know, if you kind of want to walk through something or show a certain part of your screen. So you know, a lot of nice features with that. So that's you know, that's something that's capable. Just a couple things. You know, like I said, writing, drawing, highlighter, etc. This is something that historically our students that use smartphones really struggle with. This is usually based on using the mouse and holding the mouse button in, and then, you know, using the mouse to kind of draw. So it's something that can be a challenge with a tablet or smartphone. Many of those don't allow it. Again, it's one of those things that might be hit and miss. I know usually when I've done webinars, people on tablets and smartphones can't. I have this note about something called Bamboo Pen, and you know, somebody had mentioned about a stylus. I'm not promoting Amazon, but I just did a search for this, and this is what came up, just so that you can kind of see what it looks like. This particular stylus is for iPads, tablets. I was on a webinar a week or so ago from somebody who teaches in a cyber school that was doing like a Khan Academy sanctioned webinar. So I was kind of listening in, and they were talking about this is something they use so that they can actually freehand, instead of having to use a mouse, they use a tablet and then they freehand draw. So it's just a little cleaner. The main Khan Academy guy, Sal Khan, this is what he uses for, you know, if you've ever been amazed at how nicely he writes on his computer screen, he uses something like this. So I just wanted to mention it. If it's something that you are interested in and you're nervous about using a mouse, or, you know, if you want to be able to use an iPad or something like that, it made me wonder. I actually have a Samsung Galaxy Note phone, so it made me, I kind of want to start playing with that a little bit and see if I can use that to draw. But anyways, just something else, just another resource that you can think about as you're thinking about drawing on your screen. You know, I'm sure you can think of a lot of different ways that you might use a whiteboard or a drawing tools. Oh, and I should mention, if you open up a whiteboard function, basically it's going to clear your screen. So instead of my drawing on this screen, it basically opens up a blank screen so I can start fresh, and like I could write a problem out and go through it without anything else on there. So again, you can highlight keywords, phrases, or points on the fly. You could also have students do it. You know, like a lot of times with word problems with my students, I'll ask them to circle what they think is the key information they need to solve the problem. I can demonstrate problem solving, you know, line by line as I go through for a science problem, math problem, something like that. Our ESL teacher uses this for matching activities. So a lot of times with vocabulary, and again, this is that same document. They'll have something like, sorry about this. They'll have something like this on the screen, and they will ask students to make it a little bigger so you can see it a little better. They'll ask students to draw just to draw a line from the word, the term to its definition. And then the student gets on and, they might say, okay, data is information that can be stored digitally. And they just kind of go through and draw like that. So, so that's a nice, kind of a nice activity that you can do with vocabulary. And also for geometric concepts. I showed this problem a little bit earlier. But using the draw tool can be a nice way that if I wanted my math students to work with this shape and, I kind of want to either demonstrate or I want them to break it down into other shapes. And again, this is why you might want that bamboo pencil into other shapes that they can find the area of and then start to label. So it's, there's a lot that you can do with, if you think about whenever you're teaching, you're probably frequently writing things that your students are seeing, and that's what the annotation allows you to do. Let's see, another feature that you will probably want to be aware of. And this is another one that will be, it may be hit and miss with the platforms that you're using, but the availability of polling is nice. I actually put a poll on here. So you probably should now see the ability to do a poll. Yeah, and I see people are starting to vote. So this is like an example of a poll, and it's a nice way, instead of, especially if you have like a larger number, you can launch a poll, people can respond. This is just a simple, have you taught by webinar? And I can see real time as people are voting, right now 65% of you that voted have not taught by webinar yet. 33% of you have. So that tells me right now that you guys need experience with it. So, we're kind of starting from the ground up. So you can ask all different kinds of questions through this. So that's, you can also set it up so that your participants can see the results or not see the results. That's kind of one of those things, depending on the platform, that you might want to think about toggling. What do you want students to see the results? Do you not want them to see the results? So what are some reasons you might want to do that? You might just want, like I said, what's your experience with it, or are you comfortable with it? So, that's kind of like a common thing that you might want to do with polling. Sometimes you can monitor the pace, just throw something up, have a question ready. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Am I going just right? And you can just kind of get a sense from everybody of how you're doing. You might want to do a formative assessment. You could put just like a real quick sample question up, see how many of your students can get it right. And then that tells you, yeah, we're ready to move on, or we're not ready to move on. Also, just kind of a way to check in with class. How's everybody doing? Good, bad, we need a break, we okay? Different things like that you can do with polling. Now, like I said, this one's probably a little bit more hit and miss. And honestly, this one's maybe a little bit more of a frilly kind of a thing. I think that it is nice if you get comfortable doing it. I'll be honest, I don't do it a whole lot, but I have been on webinars where people do it. Destiny Simpson's really good at that. If you've ever participated in anything she does, she really weaves it in. It makes it a little bit more interactive. It's a good way to kind of get your students, and it's an easy way to keep your students involved. Now, if you don't have polling, a lot of them have the thing where you can put a thumbs up or a thumbs down, a smiley face or a frowny face, a yes or a no. So you can even just ask yes or no questions, true, false questions using that, or questions that have two choices. There's also, not surprisingly, an app or a website that you can use that allows you to do this, and it's called Poll Everywhere. And I'm just going to show you, I don't want to get too deep into this, but basically it's one of those things that a lot of times you might have to pay for, but now for educators impacted by COVID-19, you can get it for free. So basically you can post a question, and people can either go on a website to enter their responses, or they can text their responses. So as you can see, I have this thing set up. How comfortable are you with technology? If anybody has a smartphone, if you text to the number 37607, and by the way, I normally have this up on a screen, but I'm just showing this to you just kind of haphazardly. I apologize for that. And then text this, Chuck Klinger, all caps, 132. That's the message that you text to this particular number. That would get you into my Poll Everywhere account. And then as I post questions, you can respond to those and we'll see live results. People can also do it by the web. If they go to this particular website, then they can get prompted. This is something that if I wanted to embed this in a class I was doing, okay, yeah, and see somebody actually voted. So as people vote, this appears live as they go through. And then I can put this on a full screen to make it a little bit more, so that everybody can see it very well during my class. It's something that it's fairly intuitive. I think it's something that if you want to pursue, then I think that you can pick it up, but it does take a little bit of time just to get everything set up in advance and to get it, up and running smoothly. But I just wanted to point it out that it is a nice option out there. So you can, like I said, and students can either go to this website. That makes me a little nervous sometimes because some students will struggle between toggling between screens. So like once they leave the webinar, not that they have to leave the webinar, but once they leave the webinar screen to go onto a website, a lot of times people struggle to get back on. So this might be something that you want to not do, especially those of you that haven't done anything yet. This maybe isn't something to do right off the bat, but as you get comfortable and your classes get comfortable, you can have all these questions waiting. And then as you go through your class, you can start to launch the questions that you have preset. And as you can see, people are starting to respond. Oh, good, nobody's not comfortable. I guess maybe you wouldn't be on the webinar if you weren't comfortable. But it's a resource. So for those of you that are looking to maybe spruce things up a little bit as you get comfortable, and you want to experiment a little bit, this is something that's out there for you. All right, so let me look and see what kinds of, if anybody has any questions. Good question, Marty. Marty asked if the host can save the result of a poll. Yes, and you can actually lock the poll in Poll Everywhere. With Zoom, the poll that I set up, I can actually lock it and then archive it if I want to. So yes, that will be something. Somebody mentioned to me that they've used a stylus on a Microsoft Surface and have difficulty because the Surface freezes when they toggle too much between different applications. Do you know if there are any devices to connect a whiteboard to a computer so that you can use a stylus with a non-touch screen computer? That's a really interesting thought. This was a private message, so I'm not going to out the person who asked it, although I think that it's a brilliant question. We've actually talked about if we wanted to use a webinar to like record classes, not necessarily classes that we were doing live, but to actually start to do some things that we could post that students could watch, like I said, kind of like Khan Academy, maybe for other subjects. One of the things we wanted to experiment with was using a smartboard to do that, which we have one in our building, just to see how that would record as a whiteboard on a webinar. So the answer to that question is I'm not sure. I'm very confident that there are, but I honestly couldn't tell you which ones there are. So, but that's a really good thought. Okay, so those are some of the main things that you're going to want to do while you're doing a webinar. Hopefully it gave you an idea of kind of what they look like a little bit and how you might use them. Um, just some of the common issues that you're going to see. Obviously, the first one is students are going to have trouble accessing. And there's some of it might be connectivity issues, some of it might be technology issues, but don't expect that all of your students are going to be able to access them. I will say it seems like it's something that's easier and easier for people to do. I have over the past year webinars I've been on, it's been very few and far between that I've heard from somebody that they can't get into something. The one thing that I will caution you as you start using these is there are going to be different settings for your webinars. Like with Zoom, I recently had, they did like one of those upgrades, and all of a sudden everybody that tried to log into my webinars got put into a waiting room, and that was something that I didn't change. It was just something that happened. So always consider what your settings are. So again, when I'm on the Zoom website, with the reports, with my settings, there are all different kinds of settings that I can have. The audio type that I want to allow, can people join before the host? Do people have to use an ID? Do people have to have a password? So one thing that I would recommend is once you get started with this, set up a test webinar and, make sure that people can get signed in and, and practice a little bit. But, if people struggle to get in, the first thing that I would advise you to do, unless you know that it's an issue on their end, but is to check your settings and make sure that you don't have something set that prevents people from getting in. Some of the other common issues, obviously audio issues, might be poor sound. If people don't have reliable internet or real strong internet, sometimes they're going to be very choppy. So that's a good reason to mute people unless they want to unmute themselves and ask a question. Eliminates the background noise and echoing that can get very distracting. A lot of our students can be, and a lot of our teachers can be easily distracted by background noise. Sometimes you hear things that you don't want to hear. So, that can be a little bit of a workaround with that. Another thing, and I'm sometimes guilty of this, is too much lecture as you're doing your classes. Try not to do too much lecturing. Try to make them as interactive as possible with some of the things that we talked about. But on the other hand, don't have too many moving parts. Don't bite off more than you can chew, especially as you're getting started and as you're getting comfortable with this. Don't try to do everything all at once. Just try, the first time you do a class, just try a couple of activities, see how they work, see how comfortable you are with them, see how comfortable your students are with them, and then build from there. And, finally, you're not going to be able to do a 3-hour live class. It's virtually impossible. So, I'd recommend probably an hour and a half tops for doing any sort of a live class. With the distance learning project, our live online classes that we do regularly are 1 hour, and then maybe time for questions. But in terms of instruction, you probably don't want to go over an hour and a half, and probably try to plan for about an hour if possible. A couple of general tips to keep in mind, especially as you're getting started with this. I would recommend, and if you need, you can certainly have your administrator ask me about this, and I have had a couple administrators that I've talked to about this, but I think it's a good idea to have 2 teachers on, at least until you get comfortable with it. Even if the second teacher is only going to assist students that are having tech issues and monitoring the chat, that allows one teacher to really just focus on managing the class itself, the instruction itself, or you can kind of take turns doing both. But I think that I would strongly recommend until you're comfortable with it, and even until your students get comfortable. I've noticed The more I do webinars, as I've been doing these webinars, you know, it used to be everybody would log in 20 minutes early and be doing sound checks, things like that. Now everybody's logging in at noon because you're comfortable with it. We don't need to do that sort of work anymore. So it's a little bit easier to manage. So, you know, but at least to get started, I think it's a good idea to have two teachers on and kind of decide who's going to do what, you know, who's going to be teaching what parts. And then the other person, like I said, can be monitoring the chat, making sure that, you know, if there's a lot of background noise, they can be the one that's going in and muting people. You can set up on your webinars, on almost all of them, where you can have multiple presenters or multiple hosts or multiple, you know, managers or whatever the platform calls it. Another thing, especially early, open your class 15 minutes early, you know, as you're getting started with this. That way, and encourage your students to log in early. That way you can sort through any audio issues you're going to have, any connectivity issues you're going to have, and you can get students kind of comfortable with it. And if you get comfortable with the polling or just even with the chat, you know, just have like a warm-up question that people can either chat, answer, you know, something like that to log in, kind of get started, do something, and you know, then get your class started. I didn't mention this on here, but I would also recommend that you start class on time. You know, people are very busy, and people sometimes get frustrated, especially if they log in early and you start late. So open class early, start class on time. Open the documents you're going to use in advance of the session. So you might notice that I had the, you know, I had the websites queued that I wanted to look at. I had the Adobe documents that I wanted to look at. So have them open, and that way you can kind of navigate a little bit more easily. And also people aren't going to see something that you don't want them to see. And then the last kind of general tip is I always close my email. Now my email does that little thing where an email pops up on my screen. So if I'm sharing my screen and, you know, an email pops up maybe that I don't want everybody to see, I don't get distracted by it. I don't inadvertently show my email to anybody. So I just always think it's a good idea to close your email. At least anybody who's going to be sharing their screen. So those are just a couple of you know, just maybe helpful tips for you. All right. Okay, so a couple questions that came up, or questions and comments. Are there any permission issues if a session is recorded? That came up with a session that I did a while ago, and I know Chrissy Klinger's on here, and she was the one that kind of talked about it with some experience with a college. I actually talked to somebody at the Department of Education about that, and there didn't seem to be too much concern about that. You know, I think if you're comfortable with, if it makes you feel more comfortable, first of all, the recording is one thing. The sharing of it is another thing. If you were going to post it somewhere for everyone to see without any kinds of restrictions, then, you know, maybe it's something to think about. I guess you want to think about, it's probably one of the reasons I don't really like to use webcams. One of many reasons. Webcams also sometimes can chew up bandwidth. You know, there used to be an issue where if a lot of people have webcams on, then it would impact the audio. I don't think it's as big of a deal. But anyways, it's something that I've heard questioned before, but I've not gotten any resolution to it. I haven't gotten anything saying don't do it. But it might be something to check with your own agency's policies and maybe look to it what sort of a you know, what sort of a release of information you have for your students. And it might be something that as you're doing this, you know, maybe send something out to your students so that you can at least get a verbal or an email confirmation from them that it's okay to record. That's the only thing that I can think of. I don't know if anybody else has explored this any more with any more rigor than I have. Somebody mentioned that having a second teacher is great, good to have a backup. Okay, yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, I think that it's a really good idea. I know with our professional development, they always have like a moderator and a facilitator. So, and I don't really practice what I preach too much, so I apologize about that because um, yeah, good. And Joanne mentioned about putting a warm-up question on the screen ahead of time so that people could get started. I don't have to wait for them to show. Yeah, and especially with like, you know, you can put a math problem, a reading, a poem, you know, writing prompt, something like that to get them going so that they're, to encourage them to get there early. So yeah, it's a really good idea. So, okay, somebody asked about the, okay, good, a couple things. Somebody asked about the webinars from today and yesterday on the PD portal. I don't know that they will be on the PD portal. The professional development system sends out an email every week, so there will be links to them that will be in next week's, so it'll come out next Thursday with the link to the recording. For the PD portal and the PA Adult Ed Resources site, there's a lot that goes into putting things together that go on there. And since I've been putting these together pretty quickly so that I can get these out quickly, I've been allowed to kind of bypass some of the normal constraints on things. So I don't think that they're going to end up on the PA Adult Ed Resources site, but links will be available to them. And Chrissy Klinger, okay, yeah, she shared Penn State's policy on Zoom recording. So something that will probably be helpful, and actually probably something that I'll take a look at as well. So this is my contact information, and also my coworker, Bethany Lazanik. She's kind of the quiet person behind the scenes, but she's also a wealth of knowledge about all things distance learning related. So yeah, I'll be happy to answer any other questions anybody has. You can certainly unmute yourselves if you'd like to and talk, or you can keep typing things into the chat. But yeah, so hopefully a lot of ideas for you as you start to work with this and start to put things together. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Next week, I'm not doing any webinars, but I am doing an extra office hour. So you can use this link next Tuesday at noon or Thursday at 9 a.m. And if you just want to pop in and, a lot of people just come in and just kind of hang out and chat amongst each other, share ideas, but some people just pop in, ask a question and pop out. So, I'll be here to help if there's anything that you need help with.
Chuck.
Hey.
Gordon Palmer, aka User.
Oh, hey, how's it going, User?
Great. So I was on an AWS Educate webinar in their series, and they were talking about this particular webinar. They suggested pre-recording your presentation, and then in that event you can be the second teacher to yourself to a large extent until you get to the Q&A. I mean, it's just food for thought. I mean, you seem to be pretty comfortable doing this, and you do great webinars. Just myself, I think I have a ways to go with that. So I'm considering doing that pre-recording.
Yeah, I think that that's a good idea, and I have done things in the past where I've pre-recorded something because I want to be very particular about what's said and how it goes out, and I think that a lot of there are a lot of situations where that's a good idea. I think what I might be inclined to do is pre-record something, ask my students to read it, and then do a webinar where they are, where we move past that. So kind of have almost like if I would have my students watch a video in Khan Academy or do a lesson in USA Learns or something like that. and then have the webinar to take it to the next level. You know, maybe dig a little deeper, discuss it, things like that.
Chuck, do you mind if I jump in on that question? It's Chrissy.
Oh, hey, Chrissy. Yeah, go ahead.
So yesterday I did a webinar, and one of the things that I was going to show on the webinar was going to require me to jump around like all these different websites, and I wasn't sure how well my connection was going to go and how confusing that might end up getting on the screen. So beforehand, I actually just opened my Zoom room by myself, recorded going through it and saved it, and then just put that video in the PowerPoint. So kind of what that, I didn't hear who was asking that, but yeah, there are ways, you know, you could record part of what you're doing. I'm going to say even then, it is difficult to do any webinar by yourself. It doesn't matter how much you prep ahead. It's a lot of work. It definitely helps to have another person.
Yeah, thanks, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's somebody mentioned about one of their coworkers has recorded video chats and put them on YouTube, not publicly, so that students who could not attend can watch them. That's what we do with our live online classes. So yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think that it's a good idea. I did have a question from somebody. If someone doesn't consent, do you have to eject them? I think that there are a couple of, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't even pretend to be. I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. You know, I'm stuck at my home like everyone else. But, you know, one thing that I would consider would be, you know, like I said, I don't really like using webcams. That's one thing that people sometimes get a little uptight about, is their image. There was probably a way that you could have people participate without using their names. You know, most people put in their name when they sign in, or it might automatically do it if you already have an account or if you've been signing in. But, you know, possibly allowing people to sign in using a pseudonym. I think that there are ways that you could have people participate anonymously in a webinar. And again, I don't know the legality of it, but it's something that as we start to dig more deeply into this, it is something that's something that I would probably consider as a way maybe to make students feel more comfortable with that. Okay, so sounds like people are starting to log off, and I think the questions are dying down, so I'm going to stop recording.